They're gonna kick us out of this office so quick because I'm like, man, they be screaming. They be screaming.
Think so?
I don't know. No, they're not. They can't. Ready? What's up, guys? My name is Brian Tran, and this is the story of how I became the Brian Tran. Yeah, taking it back, way back when I was a child, my mom and dad were refugees of Vietnam. They fled the country when it became a communist country, lost everything in the process, and they came here to Oakland, California. Got to see my parents work every single day, and we always had a roof and food in our stomach, but we were nowhere near rich. The good thing was that both my parents were entrepreneurs in one shape or form. My dad was a taxi driver at one point, and my mom owned a nail shop. And I saw them work 7 days a week, and that's what was our life. I went to school, and we hung out at the shops. That's it. We grew up on the corner of Seminary and MacArthur. I grew up there all the way up until about sophomore year of high school. Wasn't a great neighborhood. I mean, you had Harley Davidsons riding down. I remember our windows getting shot out. We had bars on the window, bars on the doors. And so you're basically living in like a jail cell. Didn't really get to go out a whole lot. The only time you got to go out was either to my mom's shop or with my dad to work and school. That's about it. I watched a lot of TV growing up. So I got to watch like 90210, I think, like the Beverly Hills like show about kids, rich kids. And you kind of see that and you're like, why do these kids get to, drive these fancy cars to school, eat these nice lunches and attend these beautiful schools, and I'm over here going, like looking outside and, it's dirty and it's ugly. So in a sense, I knew we were poor, but, what can you do? You're a young kid, but I knew that there was more. My imagination kind of got the best of me and saying, hey, why, how do we get there? Like early on, I remember that, like, how do we get to the next level? How do I get to that lifestyle, right? And so visualization for me was something that kind of came very easy. Yeah, so I actually went to freshman year at San Leandro High. At San Leandro High, I was actually considered smart. When I went to James Logan sophomore year, when we moved to Union City, I never felt so behind in my life. At that point, I just couldn't catch up. Like the AP English was harder, the math, I was failing. And now I realize that it's because I wasn't interested in the subject. Like I didn't care about chemistry, I didn't care about geometry, I didn't care about English literature. So, I thought I was a bad student. But today I realize that when I like something, whether it's learning about business, reading autobiography about all these wealthy men, wealthy women, like I'll get consumed and I'll read for hours. That led me down to, how do I make money? Like, okay, well, I'm not gonna become a lawyer, right? My dad always said, become a lawyer, become a lawyer, become a lawyer. And I'm like, man, I can't, like, I'm barely getting by in college or high school. There's no way I'm gonna become a lawyer. So, kicked it into high gear. I said, okay, well, I gotta go make money. And right around this time, I was reading like Rich Dad, Poor Dad, books that kind of influenced me to really try to figure it out, right? But ultimately, take action, and I learned how to cut hair through YouTube University. I think the first year I was cutting hair, I probably made about $100 a week, right? Because I'm only charging like $5, $10 a person, so 10 person. I had a clientele like 10 people, but $100 a week in high school, it's a lot. Like I had enough money to go to the movies, to pay for prom, and all that stuff. I think the cool part about that was I saw my friends have to like clock in, clock out, but for me, I was setting the schedule. Like I would only cut from 5 p.m. to about 8 p.m. And that felt pretty good. But, I even understood back then that I was still trading time for money. And then reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad, I had to buy assets that would produce money while I slept. And so that was always the goal. And I think that's probably what forced me to save money rather than buy Jordans, buy the nice Jabot. I don't know if you guys remember Jabot jeans, Echo shirts. I wore white t-shirts and baggy jeans every day. Because growing up in Oakland, I saw how we were living, riding the AC Transit, not having, when we go spend money, my mom would be like, no, we can't buy that or something like that. I'm like, dude, and then you watch something like on the CW and you see all these rich kids. I'm like, dude, I want to be rich. And then you read Rich Dad, Poor Dad and you're like, I want to be rich. Because in his book, it's very clear how the rich live and how the poor live. And I'm like, dude, I want to be rich. And I just remember that. Like, I didn't know how, I just knew I'm gonna go that way and I'm gonna do whatever I can to be rich. This might be the wrong way to say it, but one of the worst things in my life was probably one of the greatest lessons. And I was going to Ohlone, right? I went to community college. Probably didn't need college, to be honest with you, but my dad's wish was to finish college. But my second year of community college was when my dad passed away. Right? And he fought cancer twice. The first time he won, second time he didn't make it. So when he passed away, I was about 19. He actually probably passed away when I was closer to 18. The reason why was because by 18, he had already had a tube down his throat and the machine was keeping him alive. So, and he couldn't speak. So 18, but by 19, he lasted like 6 months in the hospital. 19, passed away, time to grow up. That was a pivoting moment. Like, I don't have a dad. I don't have anybody to fall back on. You make it or you don't. That was a defining moment. Despite not having any money, I applied for all the grants, all the scholarships, got through, and then all the money that I saved up. I had a little Honda Del Sol at the time. I sold that and was able to kind of go through college and finish very quickly. I transferred with so much credit that I actually finished University of San Diego, California, in a year and a half. So I finished my whole college career in 3.5 years. And the reason why was because I couldn't afford to fuck around. I didn't have time to be like the other kids and go study abroad and, you know, take their time and take all as little units as possible. My thing was, I don't have much money. And so if I stay longer, I gotta pay rent, I gotta rack up tuition. So it's like get in, get out, get ahead. The death of my dad dying taught me one thing. Number one, that I don't have anybody to fall back on. Number two, it accelerated everything. So because I already knew I wanted to get rich, now it was like, okay, I don't have time to fuck around. I gotta get rich because otherwise who's gonna pay for my living? Who's gonna be able to, you know, take care of me, right? So I had to become a man very fast. You know, realistically, I had no freaking idea. Like every other college kid, you know, you finish college and you don't know what to do. Even about going through college, I was like, I had a political science degree. Like, and I already told you, I'm not smart enough to become a lawyer. There was a moment when I thought that maybe I just finish college and start applying for a job, maybe make 40, 45,000, because most of my friends were making like 50, 55,000 as finance degrees, right? So I was like, maybe I'll make 40, 45,000. I'll go try it. But then my brother was actually a realtor at the time. And I said, you know what? That sounds better to me because you can earn commissions. And at that time I was like, okay, realtors make like 200,000, 300,000. I'm like, that's the goal. So about 6 months before finishing college, I went and applied and got my real estate license. So that right when I finished college, I went to go take the test and I got my license. And that was really when I started the entrepreneur journey. You know, it wasn't like this. Most people think like my career was this. No, it's literally up, down, up, down, up, down. But every time I went down and every time I went back up, I was always a little bit higher than my last peak. And so, believe it or not, my first year in real estate made nothing. But then I had an opportunity to open a restaurant and run Airbnbs. So year one, year two, I went to the Airbnb and I opened a cafe. 22 years old. Can you believe it? Like, didn't know what the hell I was doing. But you know what? Sometimes you gotta have faith. Sometimes you gotta take risk. And something along those lines, like I just realized that, hey, let's try it. I can't tell you, maybe it was because I grew up in an immigrant family and I saw how much risk they took and how hard they worked that I said, you know what, I'm gonna do it too. So I opened up a cafe that failed. 1 year of my life, I made jack shit. I made nothing that first year. When I say nothing, I worked 14 hours a day and barely like had $1 to my name, right? And so that's when we decided to sell the restaurant. Luckily, I found the buyer, they bought it. And then I said, okay, well, what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna go back to being a real estate agent. By this time I said, I'm gonna do it in San Francisco. And again, first year as kind of restarting, I made like $40,000 that year. Like, I probably would have made more if I went to go work at McDonald's.
What's going on through your head, man, as you're going through this? It sounds like you made 3 years, barely making nothing, losing a business. Like, why not just quit?
Man, there was an inside joke between me, my brother, and our friend. And mama didn't raise no bitch. And we don't quit. And so my thing was, I'm gonna keep pushing, right? Like, I'm 23, 22, 23. Yes, my friends were making more than me, but somewhere along the lines, like, you gotta stay in your own lane and know that your time is coming. I don't know where I learned it from, but that was what was ingrained in my head. Like, I'm all right. Like, I made something, I didn't make nothing, right? But I can see it. Like, again, I had the vision. I want to be rich. And so I just stuck with it. And I'm like, dude, as long as I make more than I made last year, that's progress. And so I made $40,000 that year, right? The next year I made $75,000. I'm like, dude, that's progress. And I knew that, dude, it's only up from here. The rise was this, 75,000, lived like I was broke. And then I had like a tick on my shoulder. I said, you know what? The first cafe failed. I'm gonna do it again. And this time it's gonna be successful. And so we opened up Rise and Grind. The beginning of Rise and Grind, when we opened it, we sunk in $135,000, right? Me and my business partner. So I was putting up half, so about 75,000. And at that time, $75,000 was a lot of money to me. That was all my savings, but I was willing to gamble, okay? We opened the store the first day, we made $250 in sales, nothing. Second day, 197. Third day, 200, very low. The first month, maybe 6,000. So we lost money. Had to pay rent, had to pay lights, had to pay the beans, had to pay the coffee. And what can you do? At the time, I remember saying this. I said, I just need this to make like $5,000 a month profit. Then I'll pay for my rent and my car. And if I could do that, then I could breathe, right? But after a year, the sales started to come up, the name started to get out there, and we started making that $5,000 a month profit. At 25, I was clocking well over $500,000 take home. And that was when I knew that I was making it. It felt like everything I was working towards hit, and I was rolling. I mean, I'm making money hand over fist at this point. More money than I've ever made before. And the reason why was because Rise and Grind was pumping. My real estate portfolio was starting to grow, all fully rented out, paying me thousands a month. Real estate, from an agent perspective, I've never sold more real estate than that year. And literally the commission checks were coming in every single week. And I made it. You only feel good now because you look back and you see what you've accomplished. But at the time, I was still hungry, driven, and I wanted to just keep pushing. So if you know San Francisco, Pop-Up Cafe was located on O'Farrell and Leavenworth. And the only way to go home, I had a janitor back then. His name was, what was his name? Edgar. I remember Edgar. And Edgar lived in the Bayview. So the only way to go from O'Farrell and Leavenworth to Bayview, you shoot down Van Ness. I would take him home every day. We would close up shop, clean up everything, and we would leave around 11 p.m. And we would drive down Van Ness, and there used to be a British motor car. And all they sold were Lamborghinis, Rolls Royces, Bentleys, the ultra high end. And at night, they would shine beautiful. I would drive down Van Ness in my 2013 black Honda Accord Sport with Edgar to my right. And I would say, Edgar, one day. My right-hand side, every day, one day, every night, just going back. And I said, I'm gonna own that Lamborghini. I'm gonna own all those cars. That one day came at 27. At 27, I made it a mission that it was time to go out and buy that black 458 Ferrari. And could I have bought it earlier? Sure. But I wanted to make sure that I truly deserved it. I wanted to make sure that my money was real. Because it's one thing to have a good year and just go and blow it. I didn't want to be a one-hit wonder. So a few years after making it, and I started to see that I was continuing to make it, and I had set up my portfolio in a way that could pay for that Ferrari easily, I said, you know what, it's time. And I wanted to buy cash. Was it the flex? Looking back and remembering that time, it wasn't a flex. It was more of a barrier that needed to be broken. A mindset shift that I needed to make, that I'm worthy of it, I can afford it, I'm deserving of the luxuries of life. That's what that Ferrari represented. I was scared shitless. It wasn't the money. The checks was easy to write. I wrote the check. But I've never driven a car so expensive. Never driven a car so fast. And so when I drove it, my hands were sweaty. But I don't know if it was from fear or excitement. Maybe it was a combination of both. But it was the most exhilarating experience ever. You know, it's kind of proving to the world that you made it.
I know you've had a lot of hard days, and describe to me like what those hard days were like.
The first hard day came when my dad died, right? Uncertainty, no security net, no safety. That was hard. But there's two ways to look at everything. You can either break and stay motionless, or you can push forward. And even though I didn't know what the hell to do, I'll be honest with you, half the time when I'm in these situations, I don't have the answer. I just have to keep taking it day by day and try to figure out a way. And I was taught that as long as you keep asking yourself the questions, you will figure out an answer. It may not be the right answer, but it's an answer. And that answer will move you forward. Jumped into real estate. Same thing. Fear. Didn't want to pick up the phone. I didn't want to make phone calls. I didn't want to go knock on doors. Who was going to trust this 20-year-old kid to buy and sell real estate? I read a script and I sounded like a robot. I sucked. People told me I sucked. What are you going to do? Give up? No. Keep pushing. I thought the answer would be pop-up cafe, and I was running the Airbnbs upstairs. Only to find out when I was working it, I wanted to quit every single day. It was miserable. I worked 14-hour days, 7 days a week, sometimes 17, 18 hours. I used to sleep in the back office on a little computer chair. And then I prayed that one day, like in between the rooms being clean, I could go into a bed and sleep in a bed. That's what it was like. And not to mention, I was in the Tenderloin. Crackheads, bums, dealing with people taking shits on the streets, piss on the streets. I was living in hell. Kept pushing. So I couldn't sleep, restless. You know, you lay in bed at night and your mind is racing. That happened. That happened all the way up until 25. Because I was worried when Rise and Grind wasn't making it. I was worried if the VA help was gonna make it. I was worried about where my next paycheck was gonna come from real estate. Because we're only as good as our last deal. And so we're always gonna be faced with hard decisions, tough life. And the only thing you can do, one step at a time. One step forward, and keep pushing. I promise you, for every bad day you have, you're getting one day closer to the good days.
All right, Brian, so speaking today, where are you now?
Today we got 9 companies. Most of them I don't run because I put people in positions to run the companies. I can now sit back, become more of an advisor, a chairman of the board, and I can make videos. I can actually spend time with my kids. I have the freedom, the options, and the choices to do what I want when I want. But yet I choose to work because we're just getting started. I'm excited. Like, I want to keep doing bigger and better things, not because I want more Ferraris or more toys. I think I'm beyond that. I love them, but what actually gets me excited is building companies with people I love being around, and seeing the young generation rise up and start doing things in an easier fashion without having to make all the mistakes I've made. And that is kind of the next level of, like, there's a book that says that you want to create leaders because leaders benefit the world. And now that's all I want to do. I want to build leaders up so that they can make money, make a bigger impact, but also now when we go hang out, it's a bigger party. It's a more fun party when your homies, your friends are actually making money with you. That's where we are.
For the young kid out there, man, maybe even like you're talking to yourself, but the young kid who wants to build a fulfilling life, like, what is your best advice to that young kid?
You're gonna need clarity. And the way that you're gonna get clarity, honestly, is you have to ask yourself that question and figure it out. But if you keep asking, you might have multiple answers. I want you to write it all down. And then from there, you have a bigger picture of what it is that you want and your idea of how you're gonna get there, and just take the first step. And when you get to that first wall or that first barrier, and you're like, well, what do I do? Keep asking. Keep asking yourself. Your best advisor isn't YouTube, it isn't me, it's not that professor, it's yourself. You know yourself the best. So ask yourself, what do you want? And how are you gonna get there?